Rolling in. All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order here. It is 6 o'clock. The Educational Programs and Services Committee. For introductions, to my left here, we have Amy Coyles, who's Director of Special Education, and then Sarah Lothamel, the Curriculum Supervisor, Catherine Giblin, Director of Special Education, and Kim Bass, the Director of Curriculum and Instruction. To my right, we have committee member Dana Hipster, and of course the incomparable Director of Technology, Jim Roth. I'm JP Prego. Our chairman, Mike Elliott, should be arriving shortly, so we'll get started without him for now. First item on the agenda is approval of the May 19, 2022 meeting minutes. I had a chance to look it over, Dana. You have any questions or anything? I took a look, I'm good.
Well, I'm going to make a motion to accept them.
I'll second it. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Next up, we have what's new at UPSD this year.
Well, we're so happy to be back here in the school year. Seeing students, it's been really great to be in the classrooms and seeing teachers and students looking happy and learning. Got a lot of positive feedback from the beginning of the school year, so we're thankful for that. So we made a copy of the agenda for our slide deck, and we're currently looking at what's new at UPSD. Just wanted to bring us back to why we do what we do. We use this upper curriculum learning model so that everything we do in classrooms, in the buildings, points to the pinnacle of student learning and sending students off into the world being very successful. So any of our professional development, the programs that you'll hear about tonight, will fit somewhere into that graphic, either building a strong foundation of social emotional learning, resiliency, cultural proficiency and inclusion, or within the pillars of curriculum, instruction, assessment, management, kind of climate and culture. And again, we always like to draw that visual encircled by community because of the great support we have from this community and our board. So that's what remains the same. But we have that's new this year, and Carol and Sarah are basically going to talk about a lot of these things. We'll list them first, and then we have a slide for each. We have Math 180, you see that arrow pointing toward curriculum. We have second step, restorative practice, and responsive classroom, all three of which support that strong foundation and basically the area of management. You'll find some instruction in there as well. And so that's what's new this year. So we will go right to Math 80 and Mrs. Giblin.
So Math 180 is what we're using this year. It is brand new. You may have heard of, you may not have, System 44 or Read 180, which is more of a common name that people may have heard. They're the interventions that we use in the area of reading for students with learning disabilities in the area of reading. In the area of math, we do have another intervention that we are using. We've employed, it's called Number World. So that can be elementary straight on through up, including high school. The Math 180 we're talking about here is more of an intensive math intervention program for our students. We're employing it and implementing it this year for the first time at the high school. So what is it? I mean, it's a digital, online, not fully online, part of it, similar to our System 44 and Read 180 intervention program. And really it's going to address the needs of our kids that have higher level intensive needs in the area of math, meaning they also will have a learning disability likely in that area. And it really is going to impact and support our students at the high school that are typically working a good 2 or more years below grade level in that area of math. So, stop for a second.
Hello.
Good evening.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you for getting started.
no problem.
I'll keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
So we were just talking
Yeah,
about
it is.
one of the things that's new this year, and it's a math intervention we're using at the high school, implementing it for some of our high school students. If you've heard of, and I'm not sure, Mike or Judy, if you have the System 44 reading intervention, Read 180. So their intervention's pretty intensive for some of our kids in the area of reading. This is by the same people that developed it, but this is in the area of math. So this is a higher intensive research-based math intervention that we're using for our kids that have higher level needs in math at the high school. So, and it's typically for our kids. The goal in the end is for them to be ready by junior year to jump into algebra. So it's really, if you look at that second bullet point, talking about really where they haven't had the ability to really gain those strong foundational skills. So it's a lot of working in those areas, really working to try and close those skill gaps so that they will be ready. So what it typically will look like is at our high school, our incoming 8th to 9th grade this year that would have typically maybe had a learning support math, they're now going to receive this, this math program. And our students that as freshmen, or last school year were receiving a learning support math intervention, they're now going to receive this as well. Sort of that, if you look at it as that's the second year of the program. And then the goal is for those sophomores that next year, entering junior year, they will then be ready to jump into the algebra. So what does it look like for 22-23 this year? So we had the two high school special education teachers. They went through, I joined them, so there was 3 of us, just because it's a new program to make sure we really have an understanding of it. The initial PD was held that in-service week for them. Throughout this school year, which is a really brilliant thing, we're going to employ coaching from the people and the team that did develop and provide the PD. What does it actually look like at the high school, the instructional model? So they will have this class 77-minute period. It's that every other day. So on a 6-day cycle, 3 out of every 6 days for the 77 minutes, they will have that class. And what is the actual model? Now, in order to do it with fidelity, there are still, because some high schools may employ this and they have 45-minute classes. Some may do the block period and they may do it for a semester. So they work with us, the coaches that provided the PD, what is going to work doing this program with fidelity and to the best of the teacher's ability. So it's really gonna look like that every other day, but even the lessons they would be expected to get through this school year, say, and then be ready to enter into the next level of the program next year. It should work out that way. It's very similar to a Read 180, what a class may look like. So for Read 180, they typically will break it into 4 groupings or subsets. Let's say it's 60 minutes, 15 of those minutes is typically independent reading. 15 minutes might be a large group or group mini lesson. Then you get into the small group where you are doing the interventions and the supports directly for those kids and what they need. And then there is the software piece. This is similar, whole group lesson. Then it gets down into the small group working with certain kids on their more intense areas of need. And then it also includes the online portion of it as well.
So what's the breakdown of online versus being with or having the instructor?
So if you were to, let's just say, and this is 77 minutes, but,
Right.
and the reason, I'm going to give an example of a 60-minute class, and it would be a 20-20-20.
Okay.
Now, the reason with the 77 minutes and how they worked with us is they're actually going to go through those, so you could say it would be that 20-20-20, but now what do you do with the additional 17 minutes? So the way they have it worked out, and to ensure the goal is to get through what they need to for the school year, on certain days, and they'll rotate, they'll actually jump into that next lesson on that same period. Now, every day they start, first 5 minutes, it's almost like that check-in, typically in our classes, all of them, I would think, or we hope, they're doing like sort of that quick review, independent, and then they get started. They do the same thing here.
Okay.
But they work it out. If it was, say, 60 minutes, you're looking at 20-20-20. So it's an equal divide.
What do they have to give up on their schedule, or how do you fit it in?
This is there for the school year, so our incoming freshmen that would get that, it's Math 1 for them. It's a credit. They're not giving up anything
It's a math credit, yeah, it's their math
Yeah.
class.
for this year and then next year.
Really dumb question. What's PD? Property damage.
It should be property damage, but I will say, you know special ed is here, so you know that world of acronyms. PD is professional development, so I apologize. Oh, I think we have a few more acronyms coming up tonight too.
Yeah, we should, yeah.
So I think it'll be a, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, are we done?
Any questions about it at this point? I think the great thing with the coaching piece is whether it's quarterly, whether it's by the semester, they can really help the teachers and the team at the high school to really pull out that data to see whether it's these class of kids or certain students where they're flying, they're doing great, this is really, and if they're not, what do we do? And how do we read the data to support those particular kids? So I think the great thing is because it's a new intervention this year, that we have the coaching all year through so they can help and work with them.
So 2 quick ones. How many people or students are enrolled in it now? And just so I'm clear, the goal is you start them in freshman year, and then by junior year, they're caught up to where everybody else is.
They're ready then junior year to take Algebra 1.
Most
Right.
people have taken Algebra 1 by their junior year though, so they'll never officially catch up, but they will get to the algebra if they
Okay.
need to.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you're,
Efficient.
Right.
And we have keystones for algebra, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
the
so
goal
it's-
is to get them hopefully to be able to use that for their
Junior.
pathway to graduation as opposed to some of the alternatives.
correct,
Okay.
yeah. And then your question
How
was
many
numbers?
were enrolled in it?
So how it's done this year, and actually if I pulled in my book, I actually could literally tell you the students in each of the 2 teachers' classrooms that they do have. But I don't have it in here with me. So how they looked at it is our 8th grade students that would have been entering high school, we would have had Math 1, we would have offered in 9th grade a learning support math class. Those students are recommended for that class because they had those needs. Those students are now in this program.
Okay.
This is it's a pull-out class, if you want to look at it that way. It's all special education students within the class. And then for our students in the 10th grade, which is the 2nd year of it, those students that were receiving that Math 1 learning support math this school year and would have gone into the next 2nd school year, or, with that learning support, they're in that, if you want to call it Math 2, but it's the 2nd level of the program.
Okay. So it's a good amount of kids at least. It's not like we're trying this program out and we have like 2 or 3 kids in it. And it's
Oh,
like,
no,
let's get
no.
basic results off of that.
No,
It's
I'm going to
it's a
say,
single-side class kind of thing. Okay.
I think we have at least 40 to 45 kids
Okay.
between the 2 teachers. I actually could get the numbers because there is 2 class periods and they're sort of working out their schedules, obviously. So I know they each do have a class that has lower numbers, but then they have a class that may have some higher numbers. But it's clearly, because I remember ordering the materials, between 40, 45.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it available to Western Center students? They can get it
Yes.
into their schedule?
Yes. They've worked it where they've tried to do the flip of it for some of those kids that might have AM or PM, hence the teachers providing it their schedule.
Cool.
So the next program that's new-ish this year, not new to Upper Perk, but new to 8th grade is Second Step. We did a presentation on Second Step last year, was that like February or March? I don't remember. And so at that time, we had implemented Second Step fully in grades kindergarten through 7th grade. This year, we rolled it up to our 8th grade class. And so now we do have full implementation in grades K to 8, which is the expansion of the program. So we offered some professional development this year for our 8th grade teachers, and we actually had a large turnout. There were new teachers there. They had their own training as well as this one, and then any in need of a refresher. So it was a nice crowd to have one of our first in-person PDs with a trainer outside the district. It was really exciting. One of the perks of the program is that because we have school-wide implementation, it's going very well because we have the common language. we have very consistent pacing and lesson delivery. So every level has a pacing guide just to kind of keep everyone on track. And I have to give a ton of credit to our building principals. They've carved out specific time to deliver these second step lessons. They recognize the importance of them and the value that they have on student learning. And so every teacher has second step in their schedules, which is absolutely wonderful. And Mrs. Siegfried has, I'm sorry? Every single teacher does. And Mrs. Siegfried kind of created a unique model at the middle school where the teachers are training who delivers the instruction so that the load is not on one subject area, that everybody kind of picks up the lesson, and so the kids can see how these skills can be implemented across all of their classrooms. So we're really proud of the implementation since this has been a 3-year project since I got here, and we're happy to have it in 8th grade this year.
And I echo what Sarah says about the building principals, but also Sarah having worked really well with the group that brought us. This was primarily a grant-funded
Yes.
opportunity. We've paid very little for this, and they keep coming back to us because they love the way that Sarah works with the buildings and the principals to make sure that it gets done well. So they keep coming back to us with more money and saying, want to try this, want to try that? Many times we say yes, sometimes we have to say no.
Sometimes we do, but yeah, they're very, they've been a nice partner with us, and our kids are really benefiting from it. Our 8th grade teachers were a little bit apprehensive, and one of our new hires was a 7th grade sub, long-term sub last year. So he stood up in the crowd and goes, guys, don't worry, the kids are going to teach it to you. You're going to be fine. So we're really excited with how this program is developed.
Okay. RP.
Another acronym.
Another
RP.
acronym.
Dana?
Dana's writing down RP.
Take a shot. All right. So restorative practices. So I will start by saying that and then we can kind of get into it. What is restorative practices? Last week, last Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, all day, there were 8 individuals that were here at the Education Center. There were 4 teachers and there were 4 administrators. So Sarah and I were 2 of the administrators that participated, and then we had Todd Amsler, assistant principal at the high school, and then Brian Callan, the assistant principal as well. And then we had 4 teachers who actually participated. So this it's considered a train the trainer model, meaning the individual was training us, and then the goal is for between the 8 of us to go out and do the trainings here in the district to other staff. So we went through this training. If you sort of just take a look at there, what is restorative practices? I would say first look at that first word. Think of restore. So really the goal here is to develop community, managing conflict tensions by repairing harm, restoring relationships. What does that mean? Number one, I would say when they refer to community, I would say, and Sarah being there as well, please jump in at any point, but I would say community really refers to our school communities. So yeah, absolutely outside as well, but the communities within the school building, so teacher to student, peer to peer, everybody within that building. The goal is really, obviously, if there's conflict, what do we do? Do we send them to the assistant principal? Do they sit down there and Mr. Callan says, this happened, here's the incident, here's the consequence. Back to class, or out for a day suspension, etc., just as an example. But then what happens, especially if you were to look at it, say, it may have been peer-to-peer. Is that it? Do we go on? So with restorative practices, that isn't it. The goal is really to work to restore if there was conflict and all of those areas. Now, what I will say is if you take a look and scroll down a little bit there, it says 80% proactive, it says 20% responsive. 80% of all of this with this program is really the positive, the proactive, it's building the community, it's building relationships, it's really working to earn and provide for one another, trust, building connections, and then I think ownership is an important piece, that's important as well. And then the responsive, that 20%, is really where there may have been some type of a conflict, And it's really getting along, so we look at a continuum that I don't know if you can really make it out there at the bottom, but really many times that may then end up going to a formal piece of that, or what we would call a restorative conference.
Our trainer told us, because we all had a really hard time wrapping our head around restorative practices, because it's not a curriculum, it's not instruction like Second Step is, but it's not a prescribed model, so what is it? And she described it as, you have all of these things on your plate that you use to create a really positive classroom environment. You have your routines, you have your rules, you have your expectations. Restorative practice is the plate that holds all of those things. So it's a way of building classroom community and building relationships that promotes positive interactions. It promotes community connections within the classroom. And should there be something that arises where harm is done in any type of way, that this can be used as well to address that situation. So a good example of like when harm's done. So we can all remember when we were in school and our teacher was out and we had a substitute. Do you recall what kind of behavior you had when that sub was in?
No comment.
So we're all chuckling because we know that while it probably wasn't us, because we all are very passionate about school and would never misbehave except for Jim, there were always a group of kids that might have given the sub a tough time. So a responsive restorative practice might be to bring the class back together the next day and say, I was out, ladies and gentlemen, and I expected, these are our behavioral expectations, and unfortunately, those were not met. How can we do better next time? So it's really taking the opportunity to teach expectations, build a really inclusive classroom environment, and create a space where kids can build healthy relationships between their peers, themselves, and their teachers.
And to add to that, where and how do we do that? So that example that Sarah just gave you, the teacher's there the next morning, the kids come in, this is where we literally see that word circle, and you can sort of see we have some chairs here in a little circle. So we want everybody, we're gonna have a little fun time. It really will only take a few minutes, but we're actually gonna do a circle. Very low risk, very relaxed, but again, this would be what we would consider more of that proactive, meaning developing relationships. So going back really quick to the example that Sarah just gave you, in a perfect world, in that classroom, that next morning, they would have started out in an actual circle with that teacher. And they would have then worked to go through, what had happened that day before, talk about it again, looking at all of those different goals, restoring, building those relationships. The piece there on the ownership, even if you look at some of those sort of, I'll call them bullet points there, these are all the areas that it really does, you look to work on. The only other thing I would say to add there, their hypothesis or their statement or their mentality, their thought process from IIRP, which is the people that are providing the professional development that we've all participated in, they think people are happier, more cooperative, and likely to make positive changes in behavior when authority figures do things, and please pay attention to the bolded words, with them rather than to them or for them. And if you were to think about, really take that in, even as a mother or father, and look at some of those examples, I would agree with that statement. And when you go through the training and when we'll work with the teachers, you really sort of see, we actually call that something, so they called it, Sarah, am I right? It was called the social discipline window, and then we decided as an Upper Perk team to change it to
The social
engagement window. Because it's actually sort of like a window, and then there's a lot of things you work through. But those words, and if you literally think about those things, doing with people, isn't that really the goal? I would say. But we also don't disagree with the fact there are times that the others need to occur. Doing something for or doing something to. There's certain instances where it is the case and it needs to happen, but in the majority of cases we would say doing with, whether it's with students, with teachers, with administrators, we would probably all likely agree the buy-in will come a lot quicker. and the work through and just people being happy.
So before we do the circle, can I just say two things?
Yeah.
One, the reason we thought it was important to bring this is just going to be something that we emphasize with our 6th to 12th grade students and teachers, because we do a lot of things like Second Step where we do common language and we're really showing students how to treat one another. Restorative practice gets to the heart of adult language as well. Sometimes, because of our human nature, we can unintentionally provoke with our reactions, and our temper might get in the way, or, you know, it happened to me yesterday, not with a student. But you know, sometimes you just, your emotion leads first. So this is really about the language that our teachers should be using with students. And the other part of it, doing the with rather than the to or for them, kids know the difference between discipline and punishment. They feel the difference. Discipline is always about teaching. It's always about the loving, teaching lesson to be learned in this. Punishment doesn't always achieve that same effect. It feels very negative, and watch how many repeat offenders you get, right? You can do that Saturday detention list and you can find a lot of common names week after week after week. The point of this is, let's get to the root cause of why this is happening. That's a symptom. The behavior is a symptom. So what's happening underneath? Can we work with you to get there so that we can do, you know, some positive changes that last in the long term? We'll be talking next about responsive classroom, and that's what we've chosen to focus on K-5 because it's a little bit more elementary. But the idea is we've done Second Step and we've done a lot of social and emotional learning that teaches students, and by association teachers, that common language. This is really meant to help teachers interact better. We have some fantastic folks, right? But we could all learn to do that a little bit better. Can you just tell them what the expectation is? Is that coming up next? Who's getting trained first? And what the expectation is?
Yes, so we are training, coming up, our group of trained trainers is going to be training our paraprofessionals. They're going to be training our school psychs and our school counselors, and our special area teachers. And so we started there because we felt as though those folks really interact with a huge majority of our population of students, and so we thought that they would be the best people to start with.
It's a 12-hour training.
It's a 12-hour training that's going to be spread throughout the year, and we'll be working as probably pairs, maybe trios of all of us that have been trained to train our staff. So we're really excited about it. It was a really powerful 3 days, and we're looking forward to it.
And we do know too, just to share, you know, from the communication too, from teachers, you know, and we all know this is a piece of our big puzzle, right? We have a lot of pieces, and I think that's important to remember. But we listen to the teachers as well, and we know with this being new training for us, for them, we know it's important, especially this first year, that we really do have the time together as the 8 of us to really work through, and what is it going to look like when we literally are standing in front of those 40, 45 teachers, and your group is in front of another 40, 45. And so the planning to make sure that all of the steps, the follow through, and just because it's new to all of us, that we're there, you know, really to work together and support each other. So we heard that, I think, pretty loud and clear too from the teacher, the 4 teachers that did attend. So we're going to, you know, obviously as a unit, we're all in it together. So we're going to try and work and support that.
So we're going to get into a circle. We do have to pull one more chair up so Judy can join us. Okay. So everyone's going to join us in the circle. No, the circle. You're part of our community.
No. We need participation. You have, okay. Are you having, do you want, I
have the question.
Okay, you're
You
good.
have a ball?
I got a ball.
All right.
We need an extra chair, right?
No, I
No,
don't.
we're good. Come on in.
I don't want to sit like Jen. I just thought I would start.
Oh, no, we do need one more. We do need one more.
Okay, sorry.
Yep, Dana's bringing it in. We're good. We're good. So,
Yeah, there we go.
just to get some historical context of the circle, a lot of this research was based on like indigenous tribes and some of the work that they did. And so historically, they would come together as a community in a circle to hash out any kind of issues that may be going on in the tribal community. And so there's a lot of power in that circle. And when you think about when you're in a circle, we all kind of have to see each other, right? Like we can't hide. Nobody's just like doing one of these. We're all in the same spot. We're all kind of in this unified shape, and so that's the importance of the circle.
Promoting equality, where there's nobody standing over you, or we're all equal.
So one of the highlights of a restorative circle in a proactive way is just to start a class with a really quick restorative circle. Carol has a ball, and so we would present a question to the entire group, give you some time to think about it, and then we're going to pass the ball around and share our question. Okay? So your question is, I promise you, no threat. If you had an unexpected free day, what would you do?
Take a quick second to think about it, and whoever wants to initiate or start first, I'm gonna actually throw you the ball.
That's our
And
topic.
then Sarah, we can decide, because it actually has to do with whether you go in a sequential, or if you do, if you go non-sequential, meaning, like, there's certain reasons you could do and make different decisions on how you do it. But I did see Mike Ellie, and I'm gonna throw you the ball, Mike.
I'd go out, I'd grab a hoagie, and I'd go hike for the day.
Nice.
Very nice.
Nice.
I go to the beach.
You would go to the beach, yeah.
I would lay in bed, sleep, have my husband bring me food, and play video games.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going out to breakfast first, then I'm going golfing. Then early enough that there's no crowd yet, then going to somebody has to have a pool. And quick dinner, and that's a day.
Isn't that a normal?
Man, you hit it out like
Okay. All right, so I wish I could, I'm actually gonna go back in time, but if I had a free day, I would have all of my 3 boys here again in this state today, or tomorrow if I have my day off. We do lunch again, up outside at Bethlehem Hotel, sitting outside, enjoying the day. Go home, have a fire pit that night with my husband and all of us, and we were all there together.
I love that.
There you go.
So basically, I'm a combination of everything that's just been said. I would probably go out to breakfast, then the beach, and I'd want to do that with my boys.
Yeah.
Because once they scatter, they're hard to get back.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm going to breakfast with Dana. And where are we going golfing? I would say that too. So that sounds terrific. But then I'd come home, and if I had everything, the house to myself, it was all quiet, I go out in the garage and I work on my Chevelle.
There you
Without being bothered.
go. Good luck with that.
And just turn some wrenches, and that would make me happy.
Jimbo? I'll go last.
Mine's closed, so I'd probably sleep in.
Definitely.
And I would go out in silence in the yard and work. I could either ride my mower, nothing could get me, right? So I would just tune it out.
Silence, man.
Yeah.
Into the woods, man. It's silence.
Just drive.
Very good.
So I would start my day with some yoga, and then I would go shopping, probably to the outlets, and then KOP, and my trek through Target, and then
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
there's a reason my call sign was Amex. So that was a very quick, circle. It was a very quick opportunity to share. But what happened is exactly what was supposed to happen. You said something, and then, oh, wait, Mike goes to have breakfast, and he likes to work in his yard, and I like to work in my yard, and oh my goodness, Carol likes fire pits, and Kim likes to be with her kids, and I like those things too. Now we're building connections.
Yeah.
And now we're building in a community, and I will forever remember that Judy likes to sleep in and play her games. And so it's a really quick way to build that classroom community and to kind of connect everybody where we're so different. Very low stress, very low, threat. If you have kids who might not know or might not want to participate, everybody has interest on what they're going to do on a free day.
I'll just sort of add to that, I think another thing we all sort of realized, and the people that were there, we already do this. If you look at, maybe more common at an elementary level, like if you think their morning circles or their morning check-ins, they're doing that. I can remember going into K-1 classrooms, and on a Monday morning, they're all sitting there, and it's, what did you, everybody gets the bunny or whatever they pass around, and what did you do that? And what is that doing? It is, just like Sarah said, building connections, building relationships, developing relationships. Here's your teacher, here are the kids. So this would be considered, this is so minimal, like just a thought to kind of get you thinking, but this is the proactive piece of what restorative practices really, I think, stands for.
And generally, middle school and high school is where that stops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
they're now faced with not just one teacher in one homeroom or two couple. Now they go to a different teacher every block. So having some kind of grounding time to make connections and feel part of a class community rather than I'm going to talk to you, and we're going to learn, and then you're going to go. You know, it's time for people to take a breath and kind of re-engage in community, which not on purpose, but it does tend to fade away in secondary. We think kids don't like it, they love it, and they still love stickers in high school.
Yeah.
Like there are certain things that,
So it's
yeah.
like pretty much the same, because I would think at an elementary level it'd be pretty easy. Hey,
Yeah.
I like chocolate.
Yeah.
You know, whereas in high school, like, I don't want to say anything because I don't want JP to judge me.
But they do. They
But
do.
they
And when
do.
she said they like stickers, I am telling you,
Yeah.
if you think your 8th grade son or daughter or 10th grade, they do. It's just, they don't mind it.
Yeah.
They actually love it.
Yep, if you set the expectation that this ball is going around to everybody, they will speak. And if they pass, that's okay, but then they're gonna want it back because they're gonna hear and somebody's gonna spark something in them. They're gonna say, oh, I like to play my games too, or I like to golf too. And so it's a really nice way to build
It's not
that
supposed to be
classroom.
threatening,
Nope.
it's not supposed to be, you know, as she said, it's a good point. If somebody's having a rough morning and they want to pass, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
Well, it sets a nice tone, you know,
Yeah.
to start.
One of our middle school teachers was all excited. She's like, oh my God, the kids are gonna get to move their desks. And she said just the sheer
Yes.
thought of them being able to move their desks into a circle, she's like, they're gonna be all in. And so kids really like this stuff. It's just a nice community builder.
And they're used to it in 5th grade. So the 6th grade teachers who are worried about it, they've been doing a lot of that, so.
Yeah. It's a nice check-in. Well, thank you for humoring us. We're gonna go back to our seats.
okay, that's okay.
I told you it was gonna be painless. We're rearranging the room, Jim, don't worry.
So because this is also
Oh, yeah.
new to the district, you know how Dr. Roach has always been on communication early and often, And so there will be some information about this, and out at the district level, we're just starting. They just had their first training. And so we are aware of who will be getting the training and what the expectation is with that. And then in subsequent years, we'll train additional teachers, and there will be some expectations about what's happening in classrooms, but that's not right now. Right now is let's get some buy-in and let's start to train some teachers. And understanding the why here is going to be critical. There's sometimes resistance to things we don't know or understand,
Yeah.
but if you understand why this works and why we're choosing to do this, that's half the battle. So we want to be very clear in communication.
I just have to say, the name those, because it feels like it's the back end of stuff,
Yeah.
as opposed to.
Yeah.
The 20%.
like, Yeah, the 20%, as opposed to the actual restorative practices program is like the whole thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the building blocks.
It's first,
More
not
so
last.
than,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just, always throws me off.
Yeah.
So.
I agree, actually, that's interesting.
And hence, the whole discussion, some of the people were saying, changing that for upper per, no, we don't want to call it a social discipline window, because we want it to be a social, like an engagement where.
Yeah.
Make it a little more positive.
Yeah.
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 And phrasing can have such an important
Absolutely
impact on people, if it sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about that today, like this committee needs like a cool, like, you know,
Cool
acronym or something.
Right.
You know, it's like,
Yes.
ooh, you know.
Good work, Mike Carroll.
EPS.
EPS.
So
Okay.
Kim alluded to this a little bit, but we are also rolling out Responsive Classroom for K-5 counselors and special area teachers. This is kind of the little brother of Restorative Practices, to put it simply. Responsive Classroom, again, is an instructional approach that is designed to create a safe, a joyful, and engaging learning environment in school community. And so similar to, oh, there's a typo there, I gotta fix
I know,
that.
I see
Similar,
that.
sorry. Similar to Restorative Practices, Responsive Classroom really puts an emphasis on the students' abilities to develop their academic, social, and emotional skills, and their interpersonal skills. But it comes through engaging instruction, building that positive classroom community, effective management, and professional development for teachers. So some of the things that Responsive Classroom really promotes is that morning meeting. Again, giving the opportunity for kids to come together first thing in the morning to check in, give a greeting, have the opportunity to share out. If you've ever been around young kids, you know they have a lot to share. So this gives them a structure for that sharing. It gives them an opportunity to do some kind of group activity, whether it be, it could be anything, a group activity, and then a morning message. So something that teachers sending the children off to the day with. Responsive Classroom talks a lot about engaging kids in setting expectations and rules and their own goals for the school year, which is very empowering for young people. They like to include opportunities for energizers, that we call them brain breaks, where the kids can kind of get up and move, but also opportunities for quiet time, which is really purposeful transition times, kind of get the kids to refocus. So again, very, very similar to restorative practices, just really geared more towards those elementary kiddos. So like I said, our cohort this year is our K-5 counselors and special area teachers. Kim and I have both been trained, and we're going to have trainers come in from Responsive Classroom to support that learning.
Because they don't allow us to do turnaround
Right.
training, they
Right.
have to be the original trainers. But, and again, we're using a lot of our grant money to fund this.
Okay.
I think almost all of this is being paid
Yes.
through
Yeah.
the grants that Dr. Farina had written, as well as some of the COVID funding that we continue to receive. What's so interesting about restorative practice, responsive classroom, and even the professional development that we're having through TLS over the past couple of years is they all are functioning from a brain-based perspective of checking in, checking on, and checking out. So you do that emotionally, academically, behaviorally. We do it really well with academics when we kind of maybe we're doing something to jog their memory when they first come in, and they're doing an exit ticket when they leave, so we're sure what they got or what they didn't get. A lot of what Sarah and I saw in our training was they were merging the academics with this, which I thought was so interesting. So for example, instead of maybe a circle, what they might be doing on a given morning in a responsive classroom is they might be just setting kids 2 and 2 to talk to one another, or groups of 3. And they're using mathematical equations or shapes. Do you have a parallelogram? Do you have I don't know, somebody give me another one. Something else. Find another trapezoid, right? Find another hexagon. And so there's practice going on there. So the teacher's also going, oh, couldn't pick out a hexagon. So they're getting some academic information too, because sometimes the complaint is, we're doing all this instead of academics. First of all, this is go slow to go fast, because when you build that community, you've got better risk takers, you've got students who are more engaged in learning, you don't have to fight a lot of the same discipline that you've been doing, but it also is working very well with how adolescent brains and younger children's brains function in that short attention span sometimes, that changing of a topic, that movement that's involved. And so all of these are research-based, and Sarah and I both said as we were being trained, wow, it parallels so much that we see going on in education right now, the good things that are happening in classrooms for kids.
And we have a huge push in the state for college and career readiness. And one of the primary skills that we know our kids need when they cross our stage in their senior year is the ability to interact with one another and to be able to engage with others in teams, in the workforce. And so all of these structures really give them the foundation for how to be in a community, in a group, how to effectively communicate, how to handle conflict, how to manage emotion, how to stay on task.
It sort of sounds like those soft skills.
So soft skills, right, that we know is missing, or needs work, I should say.
Did I ask you in a meeting, or did you and I talk one time maybe about the fact that with, coming out of the pandemic and so much device time and everything like that, it's almost like these skills are even more important because you're not running around outside all day with your buddies in the neighborhoods, you're all by
Right.
They weren't
yourself.
doing before
It's-
COVID, but
Yeah.
they certainly
Yeah.
had much worse.
Yeah.
And all learning is inherently social. All learning is social. And so when you take that out, for example, with at-home learning and you're on your own and you don't have as much opportunity to interact, it does impact how quickly students learn, how deeply they remember. So I really feel as though all of these pieces are aligning beautifully to give our kids the experiences that they need, and also the adults the language that they need to promote the kind of skills that Sarah just described, and that's huge. When we did Teacher in the Workplace 3 years ago when I got here, the employers said to us, they don't know how to collaborate, they don't know how to communicate, they don't know how to work together. And they said, you need to help them with that. We can teach them the software, we can teach them how we work on the assembly line here. You please teach them how to work with one another. Good, bad, ugly, teach them how to do that and communicate, and we can do the rest. So we're really excited that we have the grant money and that it's being channeled in such a way to promote all of those things together.
Any questions for us on the restorative practices or responsive classroom or second step, read 180?
That all makes, I mean, it all seems common sensey,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So, no, it's cool, and it's great, it's all grant money.
Yes,
It's
yes,
awesome.
with Dr. Farino, it's really successful in getting that for us. We're very happy about that.
So,
Go ahead.
So the special education plan and comprehensive plan, which you all had received information on, I will just share, I believe it was, we submitted the special education plan back in June. It took quite a lengthy period, but we did hear back, I think it was actually August 29th when the state, they did approve our plan that we have. So it took a couple of months, but it has been approved, so that is good. And if you recall, we're still continuing. So this is just kind of going through the goals in the area of the comprehensive plan as well as the special ed plan. And the big two in the special ed plan, if you remember, was that LRE, or least restrictive environment, and then the dropout rate. So if you recall, that all came from back in the compliance monitoring that was in May of 2019. And what came out of there were those two areas, a need for the district to go on an improvement plan, just because the numbers, the percents, when we look at our SPP, you know, our report card for special ed. And then hence that fall, we developed those goals, worked on them. I think I had shared when we met back in May, I think it was, we had shared that the area of least restrictive environment, informally, I was told by the Bureau advisor that supports our district and in the county, that we were approved, the improvement plan was going away with all the efforts and work. I just leave it on there. Number one, it's a good thing to continue to work on in special education, but number two, we never have yet to receive the formal notification or that. So we're continuing even though that had been approved. The dropout rates we knew was not going to go away, and that literally came down to the data and documentation. Again, this came out of compliance monitoring. This was an area, I will say, in 2021, so when it came out then in our SPP, I believe it was, we had 8 dropouts in the area of special education. What I will say is I believe, I'm just going to say I'm 99.9% sure, but I can't be positive, that this will go away, this improvement plan in that area, because we look at a snapshot and we did have, which we want it to be 0, 100%, no one is dropping out, but in 21, 22 there were 2.
Wow.
So if you look at that, that's a large decrease.
That's huge.
So
That
until you
doesn't
get
sound
your
like a lot.
report card, it's not, you know, but yeah, and honestly, there could be a number of reasons why certain things happen with kids in those areas. So,
Right.
but so that is, we're continuing with those. And then Amy and Amy jump in at any time, but so you can see up there the professional development area. So if you were to look in the special education plan, there are 7 areas. The largest thing with that is those goals to work on, but then also it's the professional development and in what areas. So those are the 7 areas that we had to come up with professional development. Now this plan ends in June of 24, which is only a couple of years away, because if you recall with COVID, they put everything back. So but to get everything realigned again, the years are still the same. So one would think we spent all this time on where is it? On developing the special ed plan. So we had the opportunity to literally go out and add another 3 years. So everything that we put in our plan for PD goes out for the new plan as well. So we'll be able to tweak coming up to the 24, but we've put professional development in there going up through 2027. Am I believe I'm correct?
Plan professional development through 2027?
Yeah, for our, in all of these
Topics.
7 areas.
Special
topics.
So areas, yeah. No. And so obviously, we don't know what we'll know in another year and a half, right? So that's where we have the opportunity before we submit it to tweak, to change, to add, revise.
So, I'd like to ask a question. So, because, and, maybe it's the end of the day, but how does, because we talk so much about MTSS and all that sort of stuff, does that fit into like positive behavioral support, or is that separate? Because we still.
Yeah, the other part of the slide is how those two pieces align.
Oh, there
So
is
the
professional
special-
development. Oh,
So
Jim
when
was
you take a
sitting
look
forward,
at
so.
those, and I'll show you a
Back up,
graphic.
this way, okay, that's the MTSS.
On one of the other slides, I'll show you a graphic where it really shows MTSS as catching all of this. So
Yeah.
that's just how
Okay.
we support kids. All of those things that Carol has listed there and all of the PD areas down at the bottom, they're all functioning from a place of meeting
Okay.
the needs of all kids. And so that is, it fits all.
Yeah,
Okay.
so everything that we have listed there, and if you look at the comprehensive plan, if you remember, so I'm not gonna read them, but
No,
they're
you don't have to,
basically
yeah.
the 2 goals. But as you see at the bottom, those are the areas. So if you look at the action plan for the comprehensive plan, there is a lot from the special ed plan that we have in there that is also in the comp plan, and what's in the comp plan, it aligns with us. So there's a lot of it, they all
There's
go
the parts
together, it's
and they
those
go
pieces
with
of
the-
the puzzle.
Yeah.
Dana, we're gonna quiz you on that last bullet point. What are
What's the
all of
first
them?
one?
We believe
You got the
in
first one.
Social emotional learning, yes.
Oh, yeah.
RP, you got that
You
one.
just did, yeah. I'm teasing.
We got them all.
Been a good place
We're
for
gonna
me.
have to start really.
IT guys usually get ragged for this, and then I came to
Yeah, you gotta work.
instruction and I went, oh my gosh.
So it does make it easier to plan professional development years
Yeah,
out
way
when
more
there's this much
acronyms than we
alignment.
do.
Yeah, so that's good. Not that, we have topics, not dates and.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Oh,
took that.
yeah, we don't need to do
Yeah.
I was like,
that.
whoa.
No, it's the area
Hurt my head.
Yeah, we are
For
back.
like autism, and maybe Amy, you can share that, like one of the big things, we work so much with the Autism Initiative. So over these next 5 years, what will we, like, what we would do with them is we work with Patan, we have consultants. For example, this year, Amy and I just talked about, one of the things in the plan was to have our teachers that are trained in verbal behavior, 1 or 2 of them to go to the next level of training for the VB. And we have that in the plan, and that's our goal, to send our teachers. We have it in for next year as well under professional development.
So
Yeah.
so through the Patan's Autism Initiative, you've heard us talk about this
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
So they come out for monthly visits with our autistic support teachers who implement the verbal behavior approach in their classrooms. And all of our teachers have gone through the boot camp to understand how to implement that model. And what Carol's referring to with the 2 teachers, there's like a next level, like an intermediate sort of training for them to go to. And then they come back and they share with their, share and collaborate with their
And
colleagues.
the couple of teachers that we're thinking about, they've actually reached out, like
Correct.
last year, so like they want
They're
it.
like in.
One
Yeah.
of our teachers from the 4 or 5 and possibly one from Hereford
Oh,
will
that's
do the
cool.
training. And one will go in the fall, the other in the spring. I just have to work out dates with Patan.
And it's sort of navigating too, like if they don't go this year, for the ones that are, and when we say like, well, who really should go to that? You need to be fully experienced and just the knowledge base from the original just teaching, and clearly you are ready to
You want
implement
some
more.
more like,
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. So that's an example.
Yeah.
And our autistic support program was very strong when it started, but it becomes stronger, and we're really working towards just, meeting the ever-changing needs of our students, because it's a spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
So we have students who are
Every
in
kid
the
is
gen ed
different.
all day and perhaps gifted, and then we have other students who really are working on the verbal behavior approach. So I'm very proud of the program that we have, and I look forward to the growth.
That's awesome. I do have one tough question, and that is, with the fact that we're short on paraprofessionals right now, how is
Yes.
that impacting our ability to deliver the least restrictive environment?
So, we, honestly, it is an every day.
And I know it's everywhere. I know.
No, it is everywhere,
okay.
right? We all know it's not Upper Perk, it's across
Yeah.
probably the country.
Yeah.
So it is an everyday workabout for principals when people, even the ones that we do have, are not out. What I will say, what we look at, and I know everybody wants to have their para, their PCA assigned within their building. So the nice ability that we have, I don't know if there's ever a day that goes by that I'm not on our para sheets, like looking at it, because so as much, and Amy and I, literally at the drop of a hat, we'll take a quick look on our website, has anybody applied? Literally, we're trying to set that up for 24 to 48 hours, because then you know the process, you can't just start the next day, we need, but yet we need them yesterday. So that's a continual thing, we continually, between HR and our department, communication ongoing, they'll tell us we have somebody, we go through that process with the agencies that we work with. And it's like literally, and then what we do when we do get somebody's coming, so we'll look at our 5 schools. We'll look at, because fortunately or unfortunately, some individuals are really more comfortable working at whether maybe just the elementary level, just the high school level, so that impacts us. We can't freely say, well, no, we're going to place you here. And I will say, perhaps 4 or 5 years ago, that could have been the case. It is not the case now. You really try, which plus you want people to be happy. So when we literally get someone, we know that they're coming, they're intensity on this level, we'll look at, here is our building, here are 5 buildings, where is the biggest need? So we have to look at it from the district side versus, I know that Hereford has this particular need, the 4-5 has this. Our middle and our high school right now, they are our, they are our highest need, because we are, I think even in the last 5 to 6 days, I believe next week we will be at the 4-5, we're okay.
Good to go. Oh,
Yeah,
good.
so it's literally, but then somebody may get offered a position and 2 days later, somebody is, you know how it happens, somebody's leaving, resigning, somebody
Especially
making a leave
anymore,
of
people
absence.
just go, oh, I got a new job, bye.
Well, and I have to
Yeah.
say too, the collaboration with many of our teachers, because students are out, there's a paraprofessional who is, is a one-to-one, who is supposed to support this student or whatever. So there is collaboration, and Carol and I are continuing to work with teams in the buildings to make sure that that happens, where we're sharing the love, if somebody's out or, if numbers are low here or whatever, we're making sure that we're kind of having to kind of shift people around and make sure that the needs of students are being met.
But from what I'm hearing, if you're trying to shift people into positions where they'll succeed as opposed to like, guess where you're going tomorrow?
Well, so,
it's like,
I mean,
you know,
that's really sort of always the goal, because if people aren't happy,
Right.
then what are they gonna do?
Right, yeah, no.
And what I'm
But it's just
sort of
nice to hear you
referring
say. I mean, that's the way you should do it,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
nice to hear you
And
say.
I'm referring
Yeah.
more to like, on the fly, this student is out today. I have a paraprofessional who has availability in her schedule, who needs help.
Yeah.
There
So-
were 4 of us this morning at our middle school, Amy, myself, Chris, and Brian, and literally there was the exact situation that had come up, and it was a high-level need, and we needed to figure it out. Now, what I will say, and most special education teachers will always, you work to resolve and resolve your problem, you communicate with your colleagues,
Yeah.
and so, but then there's the collaboration, so like, clearly it had to be figured out, and we're shifting and they're moving like paras or PCA, like they are shifting and moving, literally, and that's what happened this morning, to make sure that kids are covered. So it's every day right now that the building principals are doing that, and they've always known, like, because people are absent, so pre-pandemic, pre-issues with hiring people, that was always the case. Like if somebody has, for example, and we'll always say to our teachers too, if somebody has a PCA assigned to them, the PCA is absent, it does not mean that we are not required on that day to make sure that student gets all of those same needs that they would have gotten if they were there. What it means is we need to shift and move and to make sure that that student are still getting the support. So it's sometimes and the principals really work, they're doing the heavy duty. They're there with the teachers and the parents to try and shift every day.
Did you bring soda for everyone? All right, what else we got? What we got next?
So another update we have for you is our 22-23 UPOLA, Upper Perk Online Learning Academy. This is a program that we had in place prior to the pandemic. And then we had our pandemic, and it really evolved. And so last year we saw a very significant increase in enrollment in UPOLA for many reasons that I'm sure no one would be surprised to hear. But this year our numbers have kind of gone back to pre-pandemic world. So I just wanted to give you an idea of the breakdown. So from 1st to 5th grade we have 6 students enrolled full-time. Middle school we have 8, and high school we have 22. Our part-time students, we don't offer this for the elementary or the middle school. However, we do have, at the time that I put these numbers in, 38, but we did just add 2 more classes for 2 students, just scheduling conflicts and things like that.
Okay.
We were really excited this year to be able to extend some course offerings for kids that had some scheduling conflicts or there was an interest in something. We have a student at the high school who wants to be a cosmetics chemist. So they want to work in the chemical development of cosmetics, and so they're taking some online chemistry classes to reach that goal, and they're also a Western Center kiddo enrolled in their cosmetology program. So it was a really cool kind of hybrid thing we were able to do. And so I told this student, I said, so make sure that you remember us and you bring back some samples that we can try. So those are our full-time and part-time breakdown numbers. We did have parent nights for both elementary and secondary parents on the 22nd and the 24th of August.
Was that virtual?
They were virtual, yes. Those are all available on our UPOLA site. Ms. Molly Hartley, she's one of our world language teachers, but she also is a huge support of mine in the UPOLA program. I couldn't do anything without her. And so we worked very closely with our special ed department, with our building administration, and so we're proud of this program as well. It's really turned into a nice option for kids.
Okay.
And I know eventually Dr. Roach wants us to try to reach out and bring back some cyber students into the district. So that's kind of as we settle down in the fall, talk with Molly and Sarah about how best to potentially engage and maybe bring some back.
It's getting a lot of awareness, and we did have a few parents come back to us and say, I didn't even know. So one of the goals this year is to really get the word out about what UPOLA is and what it can offer, and the benefits of staying an Upper Perk kiddo and staying with us. So it's really grown nicely, and it's a nice option for kids and families.
And Sarah will brag about Molly, and I'll brag about Sarah. Really nice job happening in the UPOLA program. I'll also brag about Molly, but she knows that. So we had a slide before that said what's new, and this one is about what's improved. So Mike, this is the graphic I like to use all the time because it has kind of that upside down umbrella.
I like it.
It's really capturing everything that we've been doing and everything that Carol had on her slide in terms of the special education goals and alignment and professional development. It really is that the reason we come to work every day is to try to help teachers and administrators meet the needs of all of our students, which is a huge challenge, as you can imagine. So when we look at that MTSS process, we've been making great strides. So this year it continues to improve. Collectively, we've worked with teachers and building principals, and we have an MTSS team here district-wide. It's the 4 of us plus Andrea. And we really have tried to make sure there's consistency across K-3 and that it flows nicely into 4-5. What we discovered was K-5 really naturally lends itself to MTSS. We have lots of benchmarks and diagnostics and coaches and reading specialists and math specialists. They kind of can take that and roll with it. At the secondary level, it's a little bit more challenging. You know, we have teachers who teach all day. We don't necessarily have these specialists in the other buildings. So we were able to work with a little bit of some time that teachers had and give them some ownership in this with us. So we've had a bunch, well, I won't say a bunch, 2 or 3 to me sounds like a bunch, of meetings already to talk about what this group at the high school will do, to try to talk about what is secondary MTSS, what does that look like. One thing that's aiding us, as always, is Linkit. It's a tremendous program. They have a new feature now called Intervention Manager, which will help us track what we're doing for individual students. help us kind of keep that list of who do we have to keep an eye on, very current, with all of the data in there. So we're excited about that. Sarah's been spearheading the training and the forms and working with buildings on that. We're ready to roll it out this year, small scale. You never want to scare people away because it's a great thing. So we're working with our building leadership teams first so they can work to understand it and see how we can best share it with teachers and when the best time for that is.
So is that Linkit something we use already?
Yes, it's a database system that it is a great data warehouse. It has all of our data in it. And because, I mean, these guys are go-getters, the guys that began and run Linkit now. Every time they meet with anybody, they're like, what else do you need? What else do you need? What else do you need? And we said, we need an intervention manager. We need a place to track what interventions we're doing with students, how long we're doing them, is it working? So we put the progress monitoring in there as well. And so it's a robust system, and we keep putting more and more in there because it gives us the details we need to help figure out where kids are and where they need to go.
Yeah, so
That's very powerful.
Yeah.
And then you can run like, you can see individual student data in there,
Yep.
or you can run like reports based on students. Oh, that's awesome.
Class
Students,
diagnostics.
classes, grade levels.
You can
Yeah.
see trends in data over time.
Don't get her started.
Oh, I love it. You know what, we could have a whole meeting just on
No,
Lincoln.
Sarah's eyes glaze over and she gets like she's shopping, really. when
It
she's
really
looking at
is. I
data.
should have been Annex Lincoln. Yeah, it really is. It is a great resource, and it's kind of become our infrastructure of our MTSS process. So it doesn't take the magic and the art out of it, but it really helps streamline the process, which could be a major hurdle.
Now, who all has access to that? Like, if JP's a teacher and something's going on, he can go in there and put
Yep.
stuff in there and stuff, okay?
Yeah,
And then that way, like, the next year, if he's a teacher, he can go in
Yeah,
and see
and
it
what's
follows
in
it,
there.
yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
So there are different levels of access,
Yes.
and Sarah's like the master of all access. She's like
Yeah,
Lord
it's-
of the Rings.
That's-
I do, I hold the ring.
Sorry, am I correct? It's not hand-fed, all right? It's fed from other data that you have and other
Right, so
systems,
what we put
so
in,
Mike's-
so Lincoln started out as, here we go, as this
Okay.
massive just warehouse and dumping ground for
It's
data.
data into information.
And so Lincoln data points are many things, including assessments that kids are taking in the platform, which are our
Okay.
own district assessments. We put in our benchmarking assessments, our
But things like
PSSAs,
DIBELs,
Keystones,
all that.
DIBELs. We put in attendance data, we put in the graduation criteria for the pathways, we put in SAT scores, I mean, we put in everything. So, and then what Lincoln does is it works, it's mathematical magic, which I don't understand. And it helps us to really look at student growth and development in a way that, you know, our beautifully colored spreadsheets could never do for us because we couldn't even conceive some of the calculations and things we might need. So,
Is there also a part like to actually like physically put in like a note or a memo and stuff
Yep.
like that too, and like
Yeah.
reference, okay.
and that's what intervention manager gives us.
Okay.
So I can go in to a student's file and just say, so my daughter Rebecca is the 4-5 center, and I can say, Rebecca Rothermel on her DIBELS test did this, and then I have that anecdotal record forever.
Okay.
So when she goes to Amy's class next year, Amy's gonna say, oh gosh, I see that on the DIBELS too, so this is an area that we need to address with Rebecca. So it
Oh,
really
that's
is.
awesome.
It's a really amazing program that we have that really, like I said, it presents the data in a different way than I think any of us could have ever conceived.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'll say that our instructional coaches, is a nice segue,
Yes.
are as enthralled with it as Sarah is. Our K-3, especially because they've been in it for a long time. You know, we've had two coaches, Mary Kate Raytek and Kathy Fair at the K-3 level. This year, we brought on Jackie Keller, who's doing half gifted, half instructional coaching, and Jill Smurden at the middle school, who's doing full-time coaching. So Jill, we're trying to get her, you know, to drink the Kool-Aid. She's been in Lincoln, she's
getting
learning
there.
a whole lot more about
She's
it.
getting there,
But
yeah.
it is instrumental to the work that they need to do, and that's the other reason why instructional coaches are on this slide for what's improved. We know research says that professional development that's not followed up with job-embedded professional development through coaching is not half as effective as it would be. So if we're making the investment to bring in TLS, to bring in MCIU, to do the things to build capacity in our teachers, if they're going to try it and do it well and get the feedback they need, we need to have a coaching program. So we're so thankful for the board's support on that. We're thankful for the work that these girls do. I'm telling you, they were working, it was 11:30 Tuesday night, and I was like, stop it. You know, we're texting because they're in this document and they're talking and they're working back and forth. These are young moms. I'm like, y'all need to go to bed. And they're like, pot, kettle, no, I'm like, no, go to bed.
Yeah, I saw them help I was out. But they're wonderful.
So they help us apply the professional learning. They help us work with reading and math specialists to say, we see this need in math. Instructional coach, what are some instructional strategies we can immediately apply? Reading, we're seeing this need here. Reading specialist, help me. I'll go in and I'll coach the teachers and I'll help them. To have that as an aid, especially as we're trying to do MTSS at the secondary level, we would not be successful. We haven't been as successful as we could be because we haven't had those roles. So I'm really excited to see what emerges this year, having some teacher voice and teacher time devoted to that with us. So we're very thankful. I'm just going to tell you, I'll come knocking in a few more months to ask for one for the high school for next year so that we have a cohesive K-12 program. And I just think that with the training they're getting through TLS, it makes them much more able to be an instructional coach and understand how that works. Speaking of professional development, we've worked really hard to tailor it by grade level and discipline. We often hear from our special area teachers, art, music, PE, library, that you're making me do stuff that doesn't really apply to me. So we've worked really hard this year to say, this is what you're doing on this day. Some of it's very specialized and we're bringing in people for them, or they're going off. We might be able to do a bit of teacher in the workplace and send them out to some workplaces on PD days. So we're really trying to do that. In addition to, TLS is back again this year. That's teaching, learning, and succeeding. All of 4-5 was trained last year, so they're in kind of reinforcement training this year. We have our second cohort at middle school and high school who are getting face-to-face training. There's about 15 per group. They'll be here tomorrow afternoon and they're working one-on-one, well, one on 17 or 14 or 15 with this group. And then we also were able to talk TLS into doing something with the teachers who feel a little bit left out because they're not in cohort 1 or cohort 2. So we're doing some online training for them. So almost all of our secondary teachers will be engaged in TLS training tomorrow afternoon. Their main focus is best instructional practice. How do you know what your kids need and then how do you give it to them? So they do an awful lot with what's called targeted checks. So I'm presenting some information, I want to see what Dana's learned. I do this little formative assessment for the whole class, so I see where everybody is. I see Dana and Amy need a little bit more help on dividing fractions. I see Sarah and Carol have knocked it out of the park. So then I'm taking this data that I collected today in class, I'm designing something for them at their level, I'm designing something for you too. Maybe you're working with me, because we need a little bit more help there, and they're there, so we don't make the whole class sit and go through it again when they've got it. And you two don't want to hear the same thing again, I'm going to do something different with you next time. So it's really teaching them how to differentiate in a way that's very effective for student needs. It's hard, but our teachers like it. We have had really, really good feedback about the TLS program and how it's very practical, and they can immediately apply it because they build time into the workshop. Go ahead, Judy.
All right, Mr. Elliott, is it okay if I ask a question?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding, no, go ahead.
I'm just curious,
That was, yeah.
are instructional coaches also getting the
Yes,
TLS? Okay.
So,
Because to me, that seems like that would
Yeah.
be,
So
like, it would
K
be
to 3,
not a
no,
good idea,
yes.
not good.
K to 3, no, because none of the teachers are trained in K to 3.
Right, but I mean, the
Yes.
new ones, are they
Yes.
in this, are
They
they in
are.
that cohort?
Yeah, Jackie Keller was already trained
Oh, good.
last year at 4-5, and Jill Smurden is being trained this year with TLS.
So she can
And the
cohort
folks
one.
that are helping us at the high school, I think all 3 of them were trained last year. So
Great.
yeah, we do have a lot of them that are just continuing their training but have had a full year under their belt already. Great point. And actually what I'd like to do, if we can do it, is TLS also coaches coaches. So I'd like to see our coaches get a little bit more training on what the concepts are, the research behind it, and even diving deeper into how to help a teacher grow who might not know they need to, who might not want to, who is really eager to, but is just maybe too excited. So there's all sorts of teachers you encounter when you're trying to coach, and so working to build their coaching skills is important also. Great question.
I wanted to reiterate how these things all kind of fit together. So you heard Kim talk about planning activities based on engagement and how they're at the right, we call it the right level of difficulty or the right level of rigor for the student. And so if you rewind back to restorative practices and responsive classrooms, some of the points that we made was creating a classroom environment that is academically engaging. That's a pillar of those programs. And so TLS fits in very nicely with that attribute as well. So these things all kind of fit very nicely into a puzzle that we're trying to design for our kids.
And especially, Sarah, you just reminded me, one of the things we started this year with in August is we did some executive function training with our skills training with our teachers. Because you look at a middle schooler, sometimes I do, and I go, why are you not more organized? Why can't you do a little bit more of this? And Sarah and I had heard this woman speak at a literacy conference, virtual, this summer, and she was fantastic. And she talked about the 11, it sounds like a lot, but the top 11 skills a student needs to be successful in terms of schooling as it relates to executive function. Time management, organization, focus, like long-term planning, things that we think, and we think sometimes, especially at the secondary level, kids come to us with this. They don't. And actually the woman in the video said, that's not even age appropriate for them. So when we expect them to do this and they're not doing it, we think there's something wrong, but really appropriately to their development, it's not there yet. So we let the teachers watch this and have some discussion about it, and I heard some really positive things that came out of those discussions, just by way of understanding how we can organize things that we give to the kids. And so we bought them some books to keep in their library so the teachers can learn more about it. But we also pulled from TLS something called a power slide, which was a perfect example of helping a student build executive function skills, because it outlines for them the exact learning target for the day. It has the exact agenda for the day. So we're going to check in first and we're going to do this. Then our learning target is here and we're going to check on, and here's how we're going to check out. It's the same concept with restorative practice and responsive classroom, really, when you think about it. So all of these things overlap, so kids are building that sense of routine and familiarity, and I am going to be expected to share what I know, so I better try to learn so I can share something when it's my turn. So it is really interesting when we see all of this come together in a way that supports how students learn and their developmental appropriateness and what's happening at each grade level. The other pieces of professional development that we are working on this year is the Next Generation Science Standards will be approved in October of this year. This is a huge shift in science education. They talk about 3D teaching, they talk about cross-cutting concepts, they talk about structure and function, and then they talk about the content. It is radically different than our old PA standards, and so teachers, like the high school teachers, we had an in-service in August. It was so great. I could show you pictures. I should have put some in here. And they're having so much fun. We actually engaged the director of science education from Pennsylvania Department of Education. So PDE guys coming to us 4 times this year to teach us about NGSS standards, which is phenomenal. Just so we can kind of grasp how different it is. It will take a lot of years for us to build the instruction to support the curriculum, because it's very different. It's much more hands-on. It's much less content-driven, which, I don't know if you know science teachers, but they're all about their content. And they should be. That's what they know and love. So it's a big shift, and our teachers are welcoming it. They're happy. I think that we have somebody coming from the state to help us understand that. But with all these shifts and things where the onus is falling a little bit more on students, we need to have very targeted professional development, training, time, and processing so that we can implement that well. Go ahead.
Before you go forward, your natural pause. So is it to get away from, because this is very interesting, right?
Yeah.
Is it to get away from the sort of like, I'm going to stand up here and let me tell you what we're learning today? Is that like a driver of it?
Interestingly, our science teachers have always been like, let me show you. Like science teachers have always been a little bit more hands-on, but maybe it's their hands-on, because it can get scary with kids. But I think it has a lot more to do with, and I think you see this in social studies too, the movement is more towards skills, because we can Google anything. I can look up anything, but I have no idea what to do with it when I get there. So it really is all about how to take this knowledge and use it or apply it, or what does it really mean practically. So I think Next Gen Science Standards have been around for a long time. PDE said they would never adopt them, and now we're adopting them. So there's been a movement among science teachers to try to bring in some of those concepts because they're good. It's good stuff.
Do you know what the resistance was to adopting them?
A PDE? Well, they think they had it right. I mean, and truthfully, you don't put something out there you don't believe in, but I think as more states embraced it, and you can see the change in what happens in a science classroom, I think it became impossible to resist.
Okay. Just, after applause. The professional development, you said like you get a lot of feedback that the teachers love it, what we're doing and
Yeah.
stuff. Do you get like, is it word of mouth or do you send surveys out?
It's both.
It's both?
We send a
Okay.
survey.
All right.
Every time there's a professional development day, there's an actual survey in Frontline My Learning Plan where they have to sign up for the thing and then do their evaluation. They don't get credit for it until they do the evaluation.
Okay.
So we have that feedback, but we also have our professional ed committee. It hasn't met this year, but that's who we talk to about how things are going. But we have had an opportunity to meet with a lot of our leaders, our teacher leaders, department chairs at the high school, leadership teams, K through 5, and they were talking about it. And I'm seeking feedback because we're trying really hard to make it applicable, to make it subject specific, grade level specific. We're trying really hard to do that.
Right.
So what I've heard so far this year is word of mouth and what's in Frontline.
Our teachers are very open to it.
Okay,
When we
they'll
ask,
tell you.
they'll tell you
Yeah.
what they think, and we have gotten a lot of really positive feedback. And they really like, to Kim's point, that it's tailored by discipline and grade level. The teachers really appreciate the discipline specific.
Because then it's valuable.
Because it's valuable, exactly.
And it's not like
Whatever it is.
we tried to not do that before, but I have to tell you, it takes a tremendous amount of time.
Right, it's more effort.
It is, and it's sometimes the timing doesn't work. Sometimes it's more expensive to do it that way. So we're thankful that they're engaging with us to try to plan it. I think that's great. The last thing is targeted math learning. I'll just say that I'll own the fact that we haven't done a whole lot of math the past few years because we were so focused on our ELA data and building that knowledge K to 3 on, okay, how do kids learn to read? What happens when they're stuck? Is it decoding, encoding, fluency, comprehension? What do we do in that case? So we've spent really 3 years focused on that literacy end of it. And then we're still doing that. We're still doing MCIU literacy, but we're also bringing in some targeted math learning. Tomorrow afternoon, Steph Deal, who's our Hereford math specialist, and Beth Bianco at 4-5 will be working with their teachers to talk about, what do we believe about science education here at Overperk? What assessments are we using? And then we're digging directly into one of the new assessments that we're using, which is an Acadiance numeracy or a computation in grades 2 through 6. To learn a little bit about that and what it's going to tell us about kids and how we can help impact their learning. So this is all that's improved, and we say that every year things improve, right? It's a continual improvement model that we're working off of. So we wanted to share that. I also have second step, K to 7 and PBIS, because that's still happening, right? And it's just every year we get better at it. Questions on that? Ooh, sorry. So every year, Carol and Amy and Andrea work really hard to get some really quality parent training opportunities, and this is no exception. Carol, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so on September 29th, you may have, I think you heard about this at the most recent board meeting, QPR
Yes.
acronym.
Come on, Dana.
Question, persuade, refer.
refer.
So basically, this is really just a suicide prevention training program. And I think you heard at the board meeting, the goal is in the end for our 9th grade students to receive that. But on the 29th, that is when it's going to be one of our parent engagement sessions, and it will be provided to any parents that do come and join us on that day. They'll be able to go through that training as well.
Is it in person, online, or both?
This one is it's in person,
This one's in person.
yeah.
I'll update this slide deck, so when I send it to you, it has it there.
Okay.
I'll update the locations and times. You got it.
Yeah. And then on November 3rd, Hidden High and Hammered. This is one being done by Detective Beth Sanborn. If you've ever heard from her, she's actually, I think she's been denoted as juvenile detective at this point, but she works in Montgomery County. She is going to be doing the presentation. This could have been virtual, it could have been in person. We have made the decision to do it in person. I actually believe we actually have this one scheduled to be at our middle school because there is a thought that there may be a very high number of individuals that would come to this session. And I will say, so when meeting with Beth, it's interesting, the virtual session versus in person, they are definitely different. And so we clearly made the choice to do the in-person one. And so that is on November 3rd. That one is really, like, the point of this is really for parents to maybe look into and see, get some understandings of what are the look-fors, you know, for some of our kids that may end up being in a crisis situation. We don't want it to get to that point. So she works with parents on some of those areas and those look-fors. And she actually has a presentation. Literally, she has some things that are going to be there in person with her. I believe there are no children or students that are permitted to attend this. It's strictly adults. So that is on the 3rd of November. And then in January, the QBS, Quality Behavior Solutions, or just QBS, that is our de-escalation program. So that's an area we have in the comp plan, but we have this every year in the, for our staff paraprofessionals for the QBS de-escalation piece, but we're going to condense that. So typically, the entire program goes from the very beginning, talking about the program, and really the whole focus of the program is de-escalation to support students in their least restrictive environment, all of those pieces. If you went to an actual full training, which some of our staff do, it will go from that point beyond de-escalation if there is ever further needs or crisis situation to keep everybody safe. It goes beyond that. We're going, and some of our, in our special ed plan, we have the de-escalation training. It's typically a 4-hour training. We actually have already provided that during the in-service, the 4-hour training. We provided it to all of our K-3 teachers, every single one of them. We did that on the Thursday of in-service week. Next year, we will provide it to every single staff member teacher at the 4-5 following year, middle school following year, high school, and it wraps around again. Our goal is really starting next year to have the paras get it every single year. And so we'll do obviously we're not going to do a 4-hour section in January. It'll be more of a condensed, but really the goal is to work with and share the information on de-escalation. And so actually, right now, and you remember last year when Missy Taylor came and she is our district QBS trainer. So in 2 weeks, Amy and myself, so that train the trainer to help out with Missy. We also have somebody from the high school, and right now we're looking to get another individual to come with us as well. It's a 3-day training. And so then to help, as a district, because we do have a number of people that need recertifications, that need initial certifications. So that's in January. And then in March is our standard secondary transition that we have done every single year. That's more we work with the MCIU. Chris Kerbeling, who was also here, I think, last spring, he works with us on that. His main focus through the IU is transition. So he'll be with us as well. We haven't fully determined. I think we would really prefer to do an in-person one, but we also know sometimes you may reach more if we offer the virtual. So we haven't determined that yet, but that'll happen in March.
I was just yawning too. Our next meeting is October 20th, right here at 6 o'clock.
I waited for the pause.
Any questions?
I have one question.
Yeah.
It kind of fits into all this, so I was just curious. How did our first year of P2G go?
Oh, that's a great question.
Pathways to graduation, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dana.
Yeah, so our first year, actually, I met today with Chris. So,
Okay.
And the other individual that works with our core team, so it's Chris from the IU, and then there's somebody by the name of Kim Cole from Patan. And so they're the individuals we work with. Literally an email came this morning from Kim, and Chris and I met. We've actually, so we hold our core team meetings. We haven't had our first monthly meeting. It will be prior to the end of maybe the second or the third or the last week in September with our core team. So we have the same individuals as last year. We're now entering year 2. And then what Chris and I were meeting about today is We had some mentors that made a decision best to them not to continue as a mentor working with students, but then we have 8, maybe more additional mentors that want to become mentors at the middle school. So obviously they have to go through that professional development. So we're working on Chris coming out and doing it in person at the middle school within the next several, within the month, hopefully. And then, so it's moving along. We have the same core team, like I said, and we did talk a little bit about, it'll be the same in year 2 now. So typically Brian and I will continue to go to the administrator PD sessions. Kate Harmon, the student assistance counselor at the middle school, in that role. And then Missy does, even though she's working more at some of the K-3 buildings, she will continue because she was in year 1, so as far as the behavior side of it. So it is moving forward, and we should have more, information and updates once, because the September meeting each year is really looking at every student we now have, and again, through the grant, it's students with an emotional disturbance. So that's the students they take the data on. All the kids in ES, they don't have to have that disability, but they need to have the availability and the supports of it. So they take that data, we take all, and it has to do with the course performance. They look at the attendance, and then they look at the office discipline referrals. They're the 3 areas that we take data on. And so we're now, again, in year 2, but it's still in progress and meeting for that.
Did you get any feedback from the students?
From the students in the
Yeah, the
program. We
students
did
who-
send a survey actually with those students. I will say from the events that we did hold for them when we initially started it, if you remember, we had an event on a Friday, and
Kind of
just-
get to know you thing. with the
yeah,
mentors.
just being a part of that was amazing. We also, towards the end of the year, just sort of a wrap up with them and those individuals. So to me, I mean, and maybe it's something like doing interviews maybe as they move on with it mid-year, end of the year, just in relation not to the individual mentor they had or have, but more of what's the positives of it, that go-to person, which is really the point of the mentor. It's that trusted individual that in that building, at any time if you really need them, they're there for you. So I think looking at some of those things, we could sort of investigate that more.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I got one.
Sure.
The parent trainings.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe you guys know, are they on I know we mentioned at the last board meeting for the one coming up this month.
Okay.
Are they on the weekly emails too?
I believe they're in
Yes.
the newsletter, yes.
And I think Alexis will be promoting them on social media
I was
as
gonna say,
well.
that's
And I
what
think
they
we're
need
getting
to do.
more action on there. There's been more
Yeah.
posts, so I
Okay.
think that'll be another place people are
And we
looking.
did that last year.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we
Like
would
a few
try.
weeks in advance of them and then leading up to it.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Mhm.
And then we put them on the website as well.
Cool.
Anybody else? All right, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Do I have a second? Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
For the next meeting, Parker's got a game. I left his game early because I felt like I didn't tell anyone until last minute. So next